The Audi R8 V10 and especially the manuals are frequently tipped as future classics. This might be fueled by rumours that the current R8 V10 won't be continued, at least not with an ICE engine. So against this background, it's not unreasonable to expect price increases in the V10 market. After all, this is also what we saw in the V8 market. And you can click over here if you want to know more about that. There are however some large differences between the V8 and the V10 when it comes to value development. Of course, most used cars went up in value during last year, but some V10 models clearly underperformed compared to the market, while others clearly outperformed. Let's get to the bottom of this, and we will start with today's market, just so we know what's what. Over here we have the US market with the model year on the horizontal axis and the price on the vertical axis. Each bubble represents a car, and the black axis show the median price points. Finally then, you can also see that the market is divided by the base, the plus and performance models. Now you can of course divide the market in many different ways, but let's have a look at that later. For a market which is 10 years old, supply is very low. There are only 185 cars for sale. The cheapest way into a V10 is via the first generation pre-facelifted model. They tend to cost $105,000 and you can choose out of 40 cars. The facelifted ones are around $17,000 more expensive and supply is limited to 16 cars. However, this price premium falls short of the premium you need to pay for a second generation car. The pre-facelifts go for $158,000 and the most recent facelifted models go for $200,000. Naturally, there is also a significant price difference between the more powerful versions like the Plus and the Performance and the normal base version. So the market is extremely diverse. Prices go from $88,000 to $230,000, supply is limited and you can choose out of many different models. And all of this translates to a high variation in the price development. Let's first have a look at the one for the first generation and then for the second generation. Over here we can see now the price development for the first generation between January 2020 and September 2021. And look at that, we can see that prices first decreased with $5,000 or 5.2%. 2020 and especially the beginning of that year was characterized by a lot of uncertainty following the start of the pandemic. 2021 on the other hand is characterized by an increase in consumer spending and demand. We can see that prices increased with $20,000 or 22.2%, and this is an excellent score. Compared to January 2020, this means an increase of 15.9%. If we look at the underlying market with the following graph, then we can see that these developments are in line with the price developments. Look at the drop in supply. At December 2020 there were 82 cars for sale versus only 56 in September 2021. And that's a drop of 32%. It is however in line with the current market trend. Demand is simply larger than supply. Now if we look at the two graphs on the right, we can see that the increase in mileage is fairly stable and also that the median model year didn't change. Now the big question over here is of course, did the manuals increase more than the automatics? Let's go back to the previous graph and split the price development by the manual and the automatics. Alright, this is interesting, right? Look at those price differences. We can see that on January 2020 the manuals went for a premium of $7,300 and that this premium increased to $35,000 by December 2020. So the price increase in the manual market preceded the one in the automatic market. Yet this is not so uncommon. You can also see this in other models. Now after this price surge of 22%, prices stabilized and settled at $125,000. Prices didn't change during the last 9 months. So if you sold your Audi R8 V10 manual in this period, it's likely that you got top dollar for it. Now what is pretty amazing to see here is that the price development for the automatic and the manuals differ. The manuals followed the automatic ones, but the price increase over the full period is somewhat the same. Manuals went up with $22,000 or 21%, while this is $14,000 or 15% for the automatics. So we need to give some credits to those rtronics. They don't receive a lot of love on the internet. Now unfortunately we don't have enough data to really establish that there is a statistical relationship between the movements in the two markets. But based on these 3 points over here, I think it is reasonable to expect a flattening in the rtronic prices, as this is in line with what we can see in the manual market. Now before we move on, we need to talk about this large orange area over here. This area shows the uncertainty in the prices, and in fancy terms this means that it shows the confidence interval. You can see that it is very wide, and this is the result of low supply in the manual market. When there are only a few cars for sale, 2 or 3 high or low priced cars can have a large influence on the result. Interestingly though, supply developed relatively stable with 14, 5 and 10 cars. and this supply development is also in line with the price development. Now this transmission split over here is only one of the many ways we can look at the market. We can also split the market by the coupes and the spiders and the facelifted and the pre-facelifted cars. We are however not going to go through all of them as there's not a significant difference in the price development. The only split which could yield interesting results is the one between the base and the plus models. Yet, when you look at the automatics, there is no difference at all. When it comes to the manuals, it is difficult to assess. They are extremely rare and there are only 2 for sale in today's market. And that means that it's time to have a look at the price development for the second generation. Things are different over there. But before we continue, if you like this video, please support the channel by clicking on the like button below. Thank you. Now then, over here we can see the price development for the second generation V10s, and this only includes the 4-wheel driven cars. Unfortunately, I don't have any historical data for the 2-wheel driven cars. I will include them in the next market update. As you can see, the price development looks different than the one for the first generation cars. We can see that between January 2020 and January 2021, prices dropped by 8.2%. And this part is still similar to the first generation market. After this drop, prices didn't really recover. We can see that they increased with 3%. A consequence of this is that compared to January 2020, prices are down by 5.4%. There is however a very good reason for this. The underlying market composition changed a lot. So let's split the market by the different model types. This provides a much clearer picture. We have the performance model in orange, the plus in green and the base model in blue. And you can see now first of all that the price decrease between January 2020 and 2021 was predominantly driven by the performance models. For those cars, prices dropped by 7.7%. But this makes sense. It is the newest car over here and brand new R8s don't have a good reputation when it comes to residuals. If we look at the last 9 months, then we can see that the price development for the performance is more in line with the rest. Performance values increased with 6.9%, plus values with 13% and base values with 12%. And it's quite remarkable how close the latter two are. Also, because the performance is the newest model, it's not surprising to see the lowest price increase over here. And note that this also means that between January 2020 and September 2021, performance values didn't increase. They remained more or less the same, and that means that it's a clear outlier. Almost all other cars went up in value. The story, however, doesn't end here. If we look at the market characteristics for this market, then we can see first of all that supply plummeted in all market segments. Look at those drops over here. Just as in the V8 market, this strong decrease in supply fits with the used car market trend and the price trend we just saw. If we move one graph to the right, we can also see that the mileage increased by quite a bit during the last 1.5 years. And I would like to spend a moment to talk about this. You see, when we look at the price and the mileage development during the last 9 months, we can see that both of them increased. So effectively this means that if you have an Audi R8, you could have driven it and still see a value increase. That's terrific for you as an owner. Now that also means that the price increases which we just saw apply to the cars which were actually driven. Median prices for a base model, for example, saw an increase of 13%. And this 13% applies to a market where the mileage increased from 5,000 to 7,800 miles. So what does this mean for the value of your car? There are 2 things to consider over here. First of all, you need to check how much you drove the car. If you didn't drive it in the last 9 months, the price increase is likely to be more than the 13% which I just showed you. Second, you need to check how high the mileage actually is. The price increase is not always identical for low and high mileage cars. It goes into too much detail to check all of this for each and every model, but I can check the numbers for you if you leave them in the comment section. Now then, it's almost time to conclude, but we need to have a look at one additional thing before we can do that. We need to compare the price development of the Audi R8 to the one of a 911. After all, that is what people do, right? Compare the R8 to the 911. I still remember the famous Top Gear episode where Hammond was chasing Jeremy in his Audi R8. Let's start again with the first generation. Over here we have now at the top the price development for the facelifted and pre-facelifted R8s. Below that we have the ones for the 991.1, 997.1 and 997.2 Carrera S's. Unfortunately though, as you can see, I don't have the exact same dates for all of the models, so we need to improvise a bit. Let's use the period between September 2020 and August 2021. Based on this period, the R8s increased with 16 and 15%. For the 991 this is 13% and for the 997.1 and .2 this is 8 and 12%. So as you can see, the R8 increased the most, but there's not much in it, The difference to the 991, for example, might just be the result of chance, but this is quite a surprising result, I think. There are not many cars which can follow the 911s when it comes to values. Yet, if we prolong the period a little bit, so it starts at April 2020, then we can see that the 911s come out on top. From top to bottom they increased with 29, 20 and 17%, while this is 15 and 13% for the R8. So it's likely that the 911 started to increase first and that this is causing the difference over here. But still, compared to the 911, the R8 is not far behind. Now if we make the same comparison but for the second generation, then we can see that results are extremely close. You are looking now at the price development for the V10 base, plus 991 Turbo and 991 Turbo S. Again, we don't have the exact same dates and I unfortunately also didn't have time to update the turbo values. So we will have a look at the period between March 2020 and March 2021. In this period, V10 Plus and base models went up with 5%, while this was 3% for the Turbo and 7% for the Turbo S. Again, not a bad result for the R8. With that, let's wrap up and conclude. The V10 market has many market segments, so it took a while to go through all of them. But what did we find? For the first generation we saw that after an initial dip, prices came back very strong. In fact, depending on the period you look at, the increase is in line with the one for a 911. So if you own an R8, congrats to you. We also saw that the price development was different for the manuals than for the automatics. It seems to be so that the rtronics follow the manuals, but we can't confirm this statistically. We also looked at the second generation market, and this revealed that the price development for the performance models was a bit disappointing, if you can call it like that. During the last 1.5 years, prices didn't move, while basically all other cars saw a value increase. But again, in isolation, this is an amazing result for a $220,000 brand new Audi. The base models and the Plus saw a more positive price development, which also matched quite well with the one of the 911 Turbo. Yet, the price increase in those markets is clearly less than in the older first generation market. And with that we arrived at the end of this video. Now if you like this data-driven way of analyzing car markets, but would have liked to see the analysis for a different car, let me know the name of the car for which you would like to see an analysis down below in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I will make a video about it. Also don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell so you get actually notified when your requested analysis goes live. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new video.